It was supposed to be a simple surprise, leaving work early to celebrate our anniversary, picking up William's favorite dessert on the way home. But sometimes life reveals its cruelest truths in ordinary moments. That Thursday afternoon, everything I believed about my marriage, my family, and my own sister shattered in an instant. I wasn't supposed to be home until 7 that evening. The advertising agency where I worked was in the final stretch of a major campaign, and 18-hour days had become my reluctant norm. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. William had been understanding, or so I thought. "Don't worry about it, Kendra," he'd say with that easy smile that made me fall for him 5 years ago. "Your big project will be over soon. We'll make up for lost time." That morning had started like any other. I woke at 5:30, careful not to disturb William as I slipped out of bed. He looked peaceful, his dark hair tousled against the pillow, one arm flung across what should have been my side of the bed. I showered quickly, applied minimal makeup, and grabbed a protein bar for the road. William was still asleep when I left, or at least pretending to be. I'd grown used to our parallel lives, me leaving before dawn, him returning from his architectural firm just as I was preparing for bed. "You're working yourself to death," my colleague Eva had commented that morning as I gulped down my third coffee before 10 a.m. "When was the last time you and William actually saw each other awake?" I'd laughed it off, but her words lingered. 5 years of marriage, and the last 6 months had felt like living with a roommate rather than a husband. We exchanged quick kisses and brief updates, but the deep conversations, the spontaneous laughter, the passion, those had faded into background noise against the demands of our careers. "Actually," I told Eva during our lunch break, "it's our anniversary today. 5 years." Her eyes widened. "And you're here? Kendra, go home. The campaign won't fall apart if you take half a day off." "William probably doesn't even remember," I said, though the thought stung more than I cared to admit. Eva wasn't having it. "So, be the one who remembers. Surprise him. Remind him why you two chose each other." Something in her words sparked a decision. Perhaps this was what we needed, a break from routine, a chance to reconnect. I finished my most urgent tasks, delegated the rest, and left the office by 2 o'clock for the first time in months. On the way home, I stopped at Bellamy's Bakery for William's favorite chocolate hazelnut tart. I even ducked into that boutique he liked, purchasing a deep blue silk dress that made my eyes look almost sapphire. Our townhouse looked quiet when I pulled into the driveway. William's car was there, which surprised me. He rarely came home before 6. Had he remembered our anniversary after all? The thought sent a flutter of hope through me. Maybe he'd taken the afternoon off too, planning his own surprise. I entered, quietly, setting down my keys in the bakery box. The house had that stillness that feels almost like holding its breath. No music playing, no TV murmuring in the background. But something felt off. There was a subtle shift in the energy that I couldn't quite place. In the entryway, I noticed an unfamiliar cardigan draped over the console table. Not mine, but somehow familiar. Next to it sat a small rose gold compact mirror that I immediately recognized. My sister Clarice's. She must have stopped by, which wasn't unusual. Since moving to the city 3 months ago, she'd been a frequent visitor, often dropping in to borrow something or simply chat when William was home and I was working late. "Will? Clarice?" I called out, slipping off my heels. No answer. I headed toward the kitchen, thinking perhaps they'd stepped out to the backyard or gone for a quick errand together. That's when I heard it. A laugh, muffled but unmistakable, coming from upstairs. Clarice's laugh, then a lower murmur that could only be William. Nothing seemed immediately alarming. My sister and husband were upstairs, talking. Perhaps planning something for our anniversary? But why hadn't they answered when I called out? I climbed the stairs slowly, the silk dress and bakery box still in my hands. The sounds became clearer, not just talking, but something more intimate. My stomach tightened with each step, a cold dread spreading through me even as my mind scrambled for innocent explanations. Our bedroom door was partially open, just enough for me to see the rumpled sheets, the discarded clothes on the floor, William's work shirt, a floral dress I'd seen Clarice wearing earlier that week. My body froze, but my mind raced ahead, piecing together what I didn't want to see. I pushed the door open fully. There they were, William and Clarice tangled in each other's arms in the bed I'd slept in just that morning. My husband and my younger sister. Her head was thrown back in laughter at something he'd whispered, her caramel-colored hair spilling across my pillows. William's arm was wrapped possessively around her waist, his wedding ring catching the afternoon light that streamed through the windows I'd insisted on leaving uncurtained because the morning sun is too beautiful to block out. For one suspended moment, they didn't notice me. I stood there, the bakery box clutched against my chest like a shield, the new dress hanging limply from my fingers. Then William turned his head. Our eyes met, and I waited for shock, for guilt, for shame to cross his face. Instead, his lips curled into something I'd never seen before, a smirk. A satisfied, almost triumphant expression that said he'd been caught but wasn't sorry. That smirk held years of resentment I hadn't known existed, a deliberate cruelty that transformed the face I loved into something unrecognizable. Clarice followed his gaze and saw me. Unlike William, horror flooded her features. She scrambled to pull the sheet up, her mouth opening and closing without sound. But the damage was done. The truth was laid bare before me, as exposed as they had been moments before. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things or collapse in tears. Instead, I felt an eerie calm descend, as if I were watching the scene from somewhere far above my body. With steady hands, I set down the bakery box and placed the blue dress carefully on the reading chair by the door. Then I pulled out my phone, held it up, and said in a voice that sounded nothing like my own, "I just sent your video to Mom, Dad, and your boss, William. Oh, and the partners at your firm, Clarice." The smirk vanished from William's face, replaced by stark panic. "What video?" he demanded, reaching frantically for his own phone on the nightstand. "What the hell did you do, Kendra?" Clarice had gone completely pale, tears already streaming down her face. "Kendra, please," she whispered. "You didn't really—" I just stood there, watching the chaos unfold, feeling nothing and everything all at once. The chaos that erupted in our bedroom was immediate and frantic. William scrambled for his phone, nearly knocking over the lamp on the nightstand. "There's no video," I said finally, my voice oddly steady. "But it's interesting that was your first concern, Will. Not that I caught you with my sister, but who might have seen it." The relief on his face lasted only a moment before morphing into anger. "What kind of sick game are you playing?" he demanded, pulling on his boxers beneath the sheets. Clarice was sobbing now, clutching the bedsheet to her chest like armor. "Kendra, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this. It just happened." "Just happened?" The words tasted bitter. "Things don't just happen, Clarice. You make choices. Both of you made choices." I turned and walked downstairs, my body moving on autopilot. Behind me, I could hear them frantically dressing, arguing in harsh whispers about whose fault it was that they'd been caught. I sat at our kitchen island, the granite cold beneath my palms, and waited. They came down separately. Clarice first, her face blotchy from crying, her clothes hastily buttoned. "Please, let me explain," she began, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. "How long?" She hesitated, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous habit since childhood. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 2 months, she whispered. 2 months. While I'd been working overtime, coming home exhausted, they'd been building their affair right under my nose. The betrayal seemed to double in size, expanding in my chest until it was hard to breathe. I think you should leave, I said quietly. Kendra, please. Now, Clarice. Before I say something I can't take back. She gathered her things and left, the front door closing with a soft click that somehow hurt more than a slam would have. William appeared in the kitchen doorway minutes later, his face a mask of defiance hiding what I knew was fear. For 15 years I'd known this man, first as my college lab partner, then boyfriend, then husband, and I could read the tension in his shoulders, the slight quiver in his jaw. So, he began, crossing his arms. I guess we should talk. About what? How you've been sleeping with my sister, or how you looked proud of it when I walked in. He flinched at that. I wasn't proud. You smirked, Will. You weren't shocked or ashamed. You smirked. He sank into the chair across from me, running his hands through his hair. I don't know why I did that. It was just seeing you there when you were supposed to be at work. It's our anniversary, I said flatly. 5 years today. I came home early to surprise you. The color drained from his face. Kendra, I forgot. Clearly. I gestured to the bakery box I'd brought downstairs. Your favorite. Chocolate hazelnut tart from Bellamy's. William stared at the box, then back at me, his expression crumbling. For a moment, I thought I glimpsed genuine remorse, but it was quickly replaced by defensiveness. You haven't been here, Kendra. You're never home. Always at the office. Always. On your phone. Do you know how many dinners I've eaten alone in the past 6 months? So this is my fault? The laugh that escaped me sounded hollow. I've been working my ass off for us, for our future. If you were unhappy, you could have talked to me. Instead, you decided to sleep with my sister in our bed. It wasn't just the affair. It was the deliberate cruelty of it. Choosing Clarice, bringing her into our home, into our bed. There were lines you didn't cross, and William had vaulted over them without hesitation. It wasn't planned, he insisted. Clarice started coming by when you were working late. She was lonely in the new city, and I was lonely here. We'd talk, have a glass of wine. One night, things just escalated, and kept escalating, for 2 months. I stood up, suddenly unable to bear sitting across from him. Were you ever going to tell me? William looked away. I don't know. Maybe, eventually. The truth hung between us, ugly and undeniable. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a calculated deception that both of them had maintained for weeks while looking me in the eye, accepting my trust, my love. I want you to leave, I said. Tonight. Pack what you need and go. This is my house too, he countered, a flash of that earlier defiance returning. Yes, and I'm sure a judge will be very interested in how you chose to conduct yourself in it, especially with the evidence I'll be gathering. His eyes widened. Evidence? What are you talking about? I reached for my phone, tapping the screen a few times before turning it toward him. A recording app was running, had been since I'd walked upstairs and found them. You're recording this? Disbelief colored his voice. Of course I am. I'm documenting everything from the moment I found you. Your admission that the affair has been going on for 2 months. The fact that you brought my sister into our marital bed repeatedly. I think my attorney will find it very useful. It was a bluff, sort of. I hadn't actually been recording when I first discovered them, but I'd started the app before our kitchen conversation. The look on William's face told me he believed I had everything. You always were calculating, he said bitterly. Even now, you're thinking 10 steps ahead. One of us has to, I replied. You were clearly thinking with something other than your brain. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. Fine. I'll go to Philip's for a few days until we figure this out. Philip, his best friend since architecture school. The same Philip who'd been at our dinner party last month, watching William put his arm around me while Clarice poured more wine. Had he known? Who else had? Take all the time you need, I said, turning away. There's nothing to figure out. After William left to pack a bag, I sat alone in our kitchen, staring at the anniversary tart still in its box. 5 years of marriage, 8 years together total. All of it now cast in a different light, every memory tainted by the question, had it all been a lie? The house felt impossibly empty that night. Each creak and settling sound seemed amplified in William's absence. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, unable to sit still, unable to process the enormity of what had happened. Our bedroom was out of the question. I couldn't bear to look at the bed where I'd found them. Instead, I grabbed a blanket and curled up on the living room couch, my phone clutched in my hand. It buzzed constantly with messages from Clarice. Apologies, explanations, pleas for forgiveness. I read each one without responding, each message revealing more about their deception. William said you were growing apart, one text read. He said you were probably going to end things soon anyway. Another. I know it's unforgivable, but I didn't plan this. It just happened and then I couldn't stop. The final one came near midnight. Please, Kendra, talk to me. We're sisters. That has to count for something. Sisters. The word made me laugh bitterly, into the darkness. Sisters didn't sleep with each other's husbands. Sisters protected each other. The betrayal cut deeper coming from Clarice than it did from William. She was my little sister, the one I'd taught to ride a bike, helped with homework, defended against bullies. I'd even helped her find an apartment when she moved to the city, excited to have her close by after years of living in different states. My phone rang at 6 a.m., startling me from a fitful sleep. It was our mother. Kendra? Her voice was tense, with worry. What's going on? Clarice called me sobbing last night, but she wouldn't say what happened. Just that she'd made a terrible mistake, and you might never forgive her. I sat up, rubbing my stiff neck. Of course, Clarice would call Mom but be too cowardly to tell the truth. Did she tell you what her mistake was? No, just that it involved you and William. Honey, what happened? The concern in her voice nearly broke me. How was I supposed to tell my mother that her daughters were now on opposite sides of an impossible divide? That her son-in-law had betrayed not just his vows, but the very fabric of our family? I came home early yesterday to surprise William for our anniversary, I said, keeping my voice as steady as possible. I found him in bed with Clarice. The silence that followed was deafening. I could almost hear her processing, struggling, to make sense of my words. Oh, Kendra, she finally whispered. Oh my God. Yeah. Are you sure? Maybe you misunderstood. Mom, I cut her off sharply. I walked in on them, in my bed. There's no misunderstanding possible. Another long pause. What are you going to do? It was the question I'd been asking myself all night. What does one do when the foundation of their life crumbles in an instant? I don't know yet. William's staying at Philip's. I told Clarice to leave me alone. Beyond that, I trailed off, suddenly exhausted. Your father and I can come up this weekend, she offered. You shouldn't be alone right now. The thought of facing my parents, of seeing the pity and shock in their eyes, was unbearable. Not yet. I need some time. After hanging up, I forced myself to shower, to eat something, to go through the motions of normalcy even as my life imploded. I called in sick to work, ignoring Eva's concerned texts asking how the anniversary surprise had gone. How could I possibly explain this? By afternoon, my temporary numbness was wearing off, replaced by waves of anger so intense they left me breathless. I found myself standing in our bedroom, staring at the bed where it had happened. Without thinking, I stripped the sheets, stuffing them into a garbage bag along with the pillows. It wasn't enough. The mattress itself was tainted. On impulse, I called a local charity and arranged for them to pick up the entire bed that very day. Then I started on William's things, methodically emptying his drawers into boxes. His favorite sweater, the one I'd given him last Christmas. His collection of architectural magazines. The framed photo of us in Belize from our honeymoon. Each item a reminder of the life I thought we had. My phone rang again. William this time. I let it go to voicemail, then played the message. Kendra, we need to talk about this rationally. What you walked in on it was a mistake. A terrible mistake. But we've been married for 5 years. We can't throw that away without at least trying to work through this. Call me back, please. Mistake. The word echoed hollowly. A mistake was forgetting an appointment or burning dinner. What he'd done with Clarice was a choice. A series of choices, made day after day for 2 months. As I packed his things, I found myself looking for clues I might have missed. Were there signs all along that William was capable of this kind of betrayal? That Clarice, who'd always looked up to me, could cross such a line? I remembered William's increasing irritation with my work schedule, comments that had seemed like normal frustration at the time, but now took on a more sinister cast. You're never here anymore, he'd said 3 months ago. It's like I'm living alone. Had that been when he started looking at Clarice differently? And Clarice. Her sudden interest in dropping by unannounced. Her casual questions about my work schedule. Will you be home for dinner tonight? She'd ask. And when I'd say no, she'd reply, That's too bad. Maybe I'll keep William company so he's not eating alone again. The signs had been there all along, breadcrumbs leading to a truth I hadn't wanted to see. By evening, I'd emptied our bedroom of most traces of William. The mattress was gone, donated to someone who didn't know its history. His clothes were packed in boxes labeled with his name. I'd even removed the wedding photos from the walls, leaving behind ghostly rectangles where they'd hung. I was sitting amid this dismantled life when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Clarice standing on the porch, her face tear-stained and determined. For a moment, I considered ignoring her, but the anger simmering inside me demanded release. I opened the door but blocked the entrance. What do you want? To explain, she said, her voice small. To try to make you understand. Understand what? How my sister and my husband betrayed me? I think I understand perfectly. She flinched. It wasn't like that. William and we connected, in a way I didn't expect. He was lonely, Kendra. You were never home. The audacity of her attempting to justify their betrayal made something snap inside me. So this is my fault? I was working to build a future. Our future. And that gave you the right to sleep with my husband? No, that's not what I meant. Get out of here, Clarice. We have nothing to talk about. As I started to close the door, she blurted out, He said he was going to leave you for me, that he'd been unhappy for years. I froze, her words landing like physical blows. When? Last week. He said after your big project was done, he was going to ask for a divorce. That we could be together openly. The revelation should have hurt, but instead, it crystallized something inside me. This wasn't just an affair. This was calculated. Planned betrayal from the 2 people I should have been able to trust most. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw not remorse but justification in her eyes. She hadn't come to apologize. She'd come to explain why what they'd done wasn't really so wrong. Goodbye, Clarice, I said quietly, and closed the door. The next morning, I woke up on the couch with a plan forming in my mind. The initial shock had hardened into resolve. I wouldn't be the victim in this story, the betrayed wife who falls apart while everyone whispers behind her back. No, I needed to take control, to understand exactly what had happened and why. I called Eva at work, explaining that I needed a few more days off. She didn't press for details, sensing something was deeply wrong. "Whatever you need, Kendra. The team can handle things here." With time to think clearly, I began my investigation. I started with William's laptop, which he'd left behind in his hasty departure. We knew each other's passwords, a transparency we'd always taken pride in. The irony wasn't lost on me as I typed in his login, Kendra Row 519, our wedding date. His email revealed nothing unusual at first glance: work correspondence, spam, newsletters. But when I searched for Clarice's name, dozens of messages appeared. They'd been careful, using his personal email rather than his work account. The oldest, dated back 3 months, not 2 as Clarice had claimed. "Can't stop thinking about yesterday," read one from Clarice, sent just days after she'd moved to the city. "I know we shouldn't have, but it felt right somehow." William's response: "It complicates everything, but I haven't felt this alive in years." "When can I see you again?" My stomach churned as I read through their exchanges. The casual way they discussed meeting up, the thinly veiled references to their encounters, the growing boldness as the affair progressed. They'd even created a shared calendar event labeled Lunch Meeting that recurred every Tuesday and Thursday, days when I was always in strategy sessions until late. More disturbing than the logistics were the complaints about me. William portrayed me as cold, distant, career-obsessed. "She doesn't see me anymore," he wrote. "It's like I'm just furniture in the house she occasionally visits." Clarice's responses were worse. "You deserve someone who puts you first, someone who sees how special you are." And later, "I've always looked up to Kendra, but she takes everything for granted: her career, her home, you." I dove deeper. Their text messages, social media, photos they'd sent each other. With each discovery, the timeline became clearer. It hadn't been a spontaneous thing that just happened. They'd been circling each other for months, creating opportunities to be alone, manufacturing reasons for Clarice to be at our house when I wasn't. The betrayal was methodical, planned, deliberate. By afternoon, I'd compiled everything into a folder on my laptop. Evidence, not just for divorce proceedings, but for myself. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that what I'd seen and felt was real. My phone had been buzzing all day with messages from William, each more desperate than the last. "We need to talk about this in person. Please don't make any rash decisions. 5 years of marriage deserves more than this. I made a mistake, but we can work through this." The final straw came when he texted, "I never meant to hurt you. It just happened with Clarice. You have to believe me." The same line Clarice had used. It just happened. As if affairs were natural disasters, unavoidable acts of God rather than series of deliberate choices. I finally replied, "I know it's been going on for 3 months, not 2. I know about your Tuesday and Thursday lunch meetings. I know you told her you were planning to leave me after my project ended. Stop lying to me, William. It's over." His response came quickly. "How did you—" Then, after a moment, "Fine. Can we at least talk about dividing everything fairly, without lawyers?" The audacity was almost impressive. He'd betrayed me in the most intimate way possible, and now wanted an amicable split. I didn't respond. Instead, I called Avery, a college friend who'd become a divorce attorney. We'd chatted at a reunion last year, and she'd given me her card with a joke about hoping I'd never need it. I found it now in my desk. "Drawer?" "Kendra, it's been too long," she answered warmly. "How are you?" "I need a divorce lawyer," I said without preamble. "My husband has been sleeping with my sister for the past 3 months." The silence on the other end spoke volumes. "Jesus, Kendra, I'm so sorry." Her voice shifted from friend to professional. "Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? 9 o'clock?" With that appointment set, I turned my attention to practical matters. Our joint bank accounts, credit cards, the mortgage on the townhouse. William and I had always maintained financial transparency, another illusion apparently. I needed to protect myself now. I transferred half of our savings into a new account in my name only. Not everything. I wasn't trying to hide assets, but enough to ensure I'd have resources if William decided to be vindictive. I made a list of all our major possessions, took photos of valuable items, and gathered important documents. As I worked, I realized how much of myself I'd invested in this marriage, in the idea of us as a team. We'd planned our future together, the renovations we wanted to make to the townhouse, the trip to Japan we'd been saving for, even tentative conversations about starting a family once my career stabilized. All of it now seemed like an elaborate fantasy. The doorbell rang around 7 that evening. I tensed, expecting William or Clarice again, but through the peephole I saw my friend Selma standing on the porch, holding a bottle of wine and takeout bags. "Eva called me," she explained when I opened the door. "She said something was wrong, but you wouldn't tell her what. I brought reinforcements." She lifted the wine bottle. I hadn't planned to tell anyone yet, but seeing Selma, who'd been there through college, my first job, meeting William, the wall I'd carefully constructed crumbled. The whole story came pouring out as we sat on the couch, the food forgotten, the wine opened, but barely touched. "That absolute bastard," Selma said when I finished. "And Clarice, your own sister? I always thought she idolized you." Apparently not enough. I stared at my untouched wine glass. The worst part is they're trying to blame me. My work schedule, my focus on my career. As if that justifies any of this. Selma's eyes flashed with anger. Classic deflection. They're trying to shift responsibility because they can't face what they did. She reached for my hand. This is your fault, Kendra. Not one bit of it." For the first time since discovering them, I felt tears threatening. Not tears of sadness or loss, but of gratitude for this fierce friendship. "I have a meeting with a divorce lawyer tomorrow," I said, squeezing her hand. "I'm not letting them get away with this." "Good," Selma nodded firmly. "And you're not facing this alone. Whatever you need, a place to stay, someone to pack up his crap, an alibi for when I murder him in his sleep, I'm here." The joke surprised a laugh out of me, the sound strange and rusty. It wasn't happiness, not even close. But it was something like strength. A reminder that while my marriage and my relationship with my sister were shattered beyond repair, I wasn't broken. I still had people I could trust, a life I could rebuild. "First," I said, reaching for my wine at last, "I need to figure out what I'm going to do about the house. I can't stay here with all these memories, but I'm damned if I'm going to be the one who has to move." "One step at a time," Selma advised. "You don't have to figure everything out tonight." But as we talked into the night, the outline of a plan began to take shape. Not just for the divorce, but for the afterward. For the life I would build from the ashes of this betrayal. The offices of Blackwell and Associates occupied half a floor in a sleek downtown building. As the elevator climbed to the 23rd floor, I straightened my blazer and took a deep breath. I'd chosen my outfit carefully that morning, a charcoal gray suit I usually reserved for client presentations, hair pulled back in a tight bun, minimal makeup. Armor for battle. Avery met me in the reception area, her professional demeanor softening. When she saw me, "Come on back," she said, leading me through glass doors to her corner office with its panoramic view of the city. Once the door closed behind us, she gestured to a comfortable chair. "Before we start, I need to ask, are you sure about this? Divorce is a major step, especially when emotions are running high. I found my husband in bed with my sister," I replied evenly. "I'm very sure." She nodded, all business now. "Tell me everything. And I mean everything, Kendra. The good, the bad, the ugly. I need to know what we're dealing with. For the next hour, I laid out the details. My discovery, the confrontation, the evidence I'd gathered, our financial situation, the property and assets we shared. Avery took meticulous notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. The good news, she said when I finished, is that Virginia is an equitable distribution state. We don't necessarily divide everything 50-50. The court considers factors like the circumstances that led to the divorce. You mean the affair? Exactly. William's infidelity, especially with your sister, works in our favor. She tapped her pen against her notepad. The bad news is that divorces can get messy fast, especially when both parties feel wronged. Both parties? I raised an eyebrow. How exactly is William wronged in this scenario? I'm not saying he is, Avery clarified. But from what you've told me about his texts, he feels justified in what he did. He might try to argue that you were emotionally absent, that you prioritized work over the marriage. It wouldn't excuse the affair, but it could complicate things if we're fighting over assets. I thought about the townhouse we'd purchased together 3 years ago, the investment accounts we'd built, the artwork we'd collected, so many things that had once represented our shared future. I don't want to drag this out, I said finally. I want a clean break. Fair, but decisive. Avery nodded. Then our best approach is to come in strong, but reasonable. We'll make it clear that we have evidence of the affair, but we're willing to negotiate a settlement that's equitable. She outlined the process ahead. Filing the petition, the mandatory waiting period, negotiations over property division, potentially mediation if we couldn't reach an agreement directly. What about Clarice? I asked. Can I don't know, sue her or something? Technically, Virginia still recognizes alienation of affection claims, but they're difficult to prove and rarely result in significant damages. Avery's expression softened. Honestly, Kendra, those suits usually just prolong the pain. The best revenge is moving forward with your life. By the time I left Avery's office, I had a plan and a timeline. The divorce petition would be filed within a week. William would be served at his office rather than at Philip's apartment, a professional courtesy I wasn't inclined to extend given the circumstances. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Dad and I are driving up. Tomorrow. No arguments. You need family right now. Family. The word felt hollow. Half of my immediate family had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. But I couldn't deny that the thought of my parents' support brought some comfort. Was about to start my car when another text came through, from William. I'm at the house. We need to talk. Please come home. Anger flared hot and immediate. Home. As if it were still our shared space, as if he had any right to be there after what he'd done. I drove to the townhouse with white-knuckled hands on the steering wheel, rehearsing what I would say, the boundaries I would establish. When I pulled into the driveway, William's car was parked on the street, and I could see him sitting on the front steps, head in his hands. He stood when I approached, his face haggard. He'd clearly not slept well. His usually neatly styled hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled. Some petty part of me was glad to see him suffering. You shouldn't be here, I said, stopping several feet away from him. Kendra, please. He took a step toward me, and I instinctively stepped back. He noticed and stopped, hurt flashing across his face. I just want to talk. To explain. Explain what? How you've been sleeping with my sister? How you plan to leave me but didn't have the decency to do it before starting up with her? What exactly needs explaining, William? It wasn't like that. He ran a hand through his hair. It got complicated. Yes, Clarice and it happened, but it wasn't planned. And I never said I was going to leave you for her. That's something she made up. Don't. I held up a hand. Don't stand there and lie to me. I've seen the emails, the texts. I know exactly what you two have been saying to each other. His eyes widened. You went through my emails? Damn right I did. And it's a good thing, too, since neither of you seems capable of telling the truth. William's expression hardened. So what now? You file for divorce? We both get lawyers? Drag each other through the mud for months? Is that what you want? What I wanted was a faithful husband. What I wanted was a sister I could trust. Those options are off the table now. So yes, divorce is what comes next. Can we at least talk about how to handle this like adults? Without lawyers? I almost laughed. Like adults? Was it adult to sleep with my sister in our bed? Was it adult to lie to my face for months? I shook my head. No, William. We're beyond that now. My lawyer will be in touch with you soon. Your lawyer? Jesus, Kendra, you've already hired a lawyer. He looked genuinely shocked, as if he'd expected me to be paralyzed by the betrayal, unable to take action. Yes, and I suggest you do the same. I moved past him to the front door. Now please leave. This is still legally our house, but I'm the one living here right now, and I don't want you inside. I need to get some of my things, he protested. Clothes, my work files, Make a list and send it to me. I'll have it ready for you to pick up when I'm not here. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, then turned to face him one more time. You know what hurts the most, William? Not the affair itself, but the fact that you don't even seem sorry. Not really. You're sorry you got caught. Sorry for the inconvenience this causes you. But you're not sorry for the pain you've caused. Before he could respond, I closed the door and locked it, then leaned against it, heart pounding. Through the wood, I heard him call my name once more before his footsteps retreated down the path. The house felt like a battlefield now, with invisible tripwires of memories everywhere. The kitchen where we'd cooked Sunday brunches, the living room where we'd hosted game nights with friends, the now empty bedroom where he'd betrayed me with my own sister. I sank down onto the floor, back still against the door, and finally allowed myself to cry. Not for William, not even for the marriage I'd lost, but for the sister who had once been my closest ally and was now a stranger to me. My parents arrived the next morning, their faces drawn with concern and confusion. My mother embraced me in the driveway, holding me with a fierce protectiveness I hadn't felt since childhood. Oh, my sweet girl, she whispered against my hair. I'm so sorry. My father stood awkwardly to the side, hands stuffed in his pockets, his expression a mixture of rage and helplessness. He'd always been protective of his daughters, and now one had deeply wounded the other. I could see the conflict in his eyes. Dad, I said, breaking away from my mother to hug him. He held me tightly, not saying anything, just offering steady support. Inside, I made coffee while they settled at the kitchen island. Neither of them commented on the empty spaces where photos had hung or the boxes stacked in the corner labeled William. Have you talked to Clarice? My mother finally asked, cradling her mug. She's tried to contact me. I'm not ready. I kept my focus on stirring sugar into my coffee, avoiding her eyes. She's devastated, Kendra, Mom continued cautiously. She knows she's made a terrible mistake. A mistake, I echoed hollowly. That seems to be their favorite word. A 3-month affair isn't a mistake. It's a choice. Many choices, actually. My father cleared his throat. Your mother and I aren't defending what she did, he said firmly. It's inexcusable. William, too. But we're worried about you, holed up here alone with all this. I'm not alone, I countered. Selma came over yesterday. I've spoken with Eva. I've hired a lawyer. I'm handling it. A lawyer already? My mother's eyes widened. Don't you think that's moving a bit fast? Maybe once things calm down. There's nothing to calm down from, I interrupted. This marriage is over. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, just to make everyone more comfortable with the situation. An uncomfortable silence fell. My mother exchanged a glance with my father, a whole conversation passing between them without words. "What?" I demanded. My father sighed. "We went to see Clarice before coming here." "Of course you did." I set my mug down with more force than necessary. "She's our daughter too, Kendra," my mother said gently. "She's made a terrible mistake. There's that word again. But she's suffering. She told us William has been calling her constantly, trying to convince her to back up his story that it wasn't serious between them. That caught my attention." "What do you mean, back up his story?" My mother hesitated. "William apparently told her he's going to try to reconcile with you, that he's going to tell you it was just physical, not emotional, that she shouldn't say anything that contradicts that." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Well, that explains his sudden appearance yesterday. He wants to control the narrative." I shook my head. "It won't work. I've seen their messages to each other. I know exactly how serious it was." My father leaned forward. "Kendra, we're on your side. We just don't want to see this tear the family apart completely." "I'm not the one who tore anything apart," I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts. "They did that. And now everyone, including you two, seems more concerned with smoothing things over than holding them accountable." "That's not true," my mother protested. "We just what? Want one big happy family again? That's not going to happen. Mom, I can't even look at Clarice without seeing her in my bed with my husband. That's not something that just goes away with time and a few apologies." My parents exchanged another look, and I felt a surge of frustration. They wanted to fix this, to broker peace, to restore some semblance of family harmony. It wasn't possible, but I couldn't blame them for wanting it. "I'm filing for divorce," I said more calmly. "That's non-negotiable. As for Clarice, I don't know. Maybe someday I'll be able to be in the same room with her without wanting to scream. But not now. Not soon." My mother wiped away a tear. "We understand. We're just here for you, however you need us." The conversation shifted to practical matters. My parents would stay for a few days, help me organize the house, be present when William came to collect some of his things. I was grateful for their support, even if they couldn't fully understand the depth of the betrayal I felt. William arrived that afternoon while my father and I were sorting through the garage, separating tools and equipment. I heard the car pull up and tensed, but my father placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "I'll handle this," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. I watched from the garage as my father met William in the driveway. Even from a distance, I could see William's shock at finding my father there. The conversation was brief, tense. William handed over a list of items he wanted, and my father nodded curtly before turning back toward the garage. "He'll be back tomorrow at 2 to collect his things," my father reported. "I told him you'd have everything ready by the front door. You don't need to be here." Relief washed over me. "Thank you, Dad." "He wanted to talk to you," he added, his expression darkening. I told him that wasn't happening. Not today. That evening, as my parents and I sat in the living room with takeout containers and glasses of wine, my mother broached the subject of what came next. "Will you stay in the house?" she asked carefully. I looked around at the space. William and I had chosen together, where we'd built what I thought was a life. "No," I said finally. "Too many memories. I'll sell it, split the proceeds as part of the divorce settlement." "And your job?" "Your friend Eva seemed concerned you might have to take significant time off." "The campaign wraps up next week," I said. "I've been working remotely, but I'll go back to the office after that. I need the routine, the distraction." My mother nodded, though concern still lined her face. "And personally? Will you be all right here alone after we leave?" The question made me pause. Would I be all right? The betrayal had torn through my life like a hurricane, leaving wreckage I was only beginning to assess. But underneath the pain and anger, I'd discovered something unexpected. A bedrock of strength I hadn't known I possessed. "I think I will." I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Not immediately, not completely, but eventually. My father raised his glass. "You're stronger than both of them put together, Kendra. Always have been." Later that night, after my parents had gone to bed in the guest room, I sat alone on the back porch, looking up at the stars. My phone buzzed with a text from William. "I came by today. Your father said you wouldn't see me. We need to talk, Kendra, please." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say, nothing he could offer that would undo what had been done. Instead, I opened my email and found a message from Avery with the draft divorce petition attached. I read through it carefully, the formal language of dissolution, the division of assets, the grounds for divorce cited as adultery. It was also clinical, reducing 5 years of marriage to legal terminology and financial calculations. Yet there was something cleansing about it too, a framework for moving forward when everything familiar had been destroyed. I approved the petition and closed my laptop. Tomorrow, the legal process would begin in earnest. Tomorrow, I would take another step away from the life I'd thought was mine and toward something unknown, but undeniably mine alone. The weeks that followed fell into a strange rhythm. Each day, I methodically dismantled the life William and I had built together. Separate. Bank accounts, name changes on utility bills, sorting through kitchen appliances and artwork, making lists of what was his, what was mine, what we'd have to sell and split the proceeds from. Avery called with updates about the divorce proceedings. William had hired his own lawyer, someone from a prestigious firm downtown. "They're playing hardball on the house," she reported. "They're arguing that since you're the one who wants to sell it, you should bear the costs of the sale." "That's ridiculous," I said. "The townhouse is jointly owned." "It is ridiculous," Avery agreed. "But it's just a negotiating tactic. They're testing to see how much you'll push back." It was surreal, this adversarial relationship with someone I'd once shared everything with. We'd gone from planning vacations together to arguing through lawyers about who owned the espresso machine. My parents had returned home after a week, leaving behind casseroles in the freezer and a standing offer to visit whenever I needed them. I appreciated their support, but there was also relief in having the space to process everything without managing their emotions too. At the office, I threw myself into work with an intensity that kept questions at bay. Eva knew the basics, that William had cheated, that we were divorcing, but I'd spared her the more painful details. The rest of my colleagues accepted my explanation of personal issues without prying, though I occasionally caught concerned glances when they thought I wasn't looking. It was Selma who finally confronted me about how I was really doing. She arrived at my door one Friday evening with Thai food and an expression that said she wouldn't accept platitudes. "You're not eating," she observed as she unpacked containers on the coffee table. "You've lost weight." "I'm fine," I said automatically. Selma fixed me with a stern look. "No, you're not. You're functioning, which isn't the same thing." She was right. I was going through the motions of living, working, sleeping, responding to emails, showing up for meetings with Avery, but I felt disconnected from it all, as if I were watching someone else navigate these tasks. "I don't know how to be," I admitted, picking at the pad thai she'd placed in front of me. Everything I thought was true turned out to be a lie. William, Clarice, my marriage. How do I trust what's real anymore? Selma didn't offer empty reassurances. Instead, she asked, "Have you talked to anyone? A professional, I mean?" I hadn't. The thought of laying out my pain for a stranger seemed exhausting. But as the evening wore on, and Selma shared her own experience with therapy after her difficult breakup 2 years earlier, I found myself considering it. "It's not about them," she emphasized, pouring us each another glass of wine. "It's about you. About processing what happened so you can move forward without carrying all this weight. The next morning, I reached out to a therapist Eva had recommended months ago for stress management. Dr. Larson had an opening the following week, and I took it before I could talk myself out of it. 3 days later, I received a bouquet of lilies. At my office. My favorite flowers. The card read simply, "I'm truly sorry. Please talk to me. William." Something about the gesture infuriated me. The presumption of it. The way he thought flowers could begin to address what he'd done. The manipulation of sending them to my workplace, where I'd have to explain them to curious colleagues. I dumped them in the trash on my way out of the building. That night, as I was going through old files on my laptop, I stumbled across photos from a vacation William and I had taken to Maine 2 years earlier. We looked happy, arms around each other on a rocky beach, faces turned toward the camera in matching smiles. Had it been real? Had any of it been real? I found myself scrolling through photo after photo, searching for signs, for cracks in the facade of our relationship. When had it started to break? When had William begun to look at Clarice in a way that crossed boundaries? When had they decided that their desires were more important than their loyalty? The questions circled endlessly, without resolution. My first session with Dr. Larson was uncomfortable. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a direct manner that made deflection difficult. "What are you hoping to gain from therapy?" she asked after I'd given her a brief outline of the situation. "I want to stop feeling like this," I said. "Angry all the time, suspicious, like I can't trust my own judgment." She nodded. "That's understandable. Betrayal trauma doesn't just affect how we see others. It affects how we see ourselves." "Betrayal trauma?" I repeated, the term both clinical and achingly accurate. When people we trust deeply violate that trust, especially in intimate relationships, it creates a specific kind of trauma response. She leaned forward slightly. The world suddenly feels unsafe, unpredictable. You question everything, including your own perceptions. It was exactly how I felt. Like the ground beneath me had turned to quicksand, like any certainty I'd once had was now suspect. "How do I fix it?" I asked. Dr. Larson smiled gently. "We don't fix trauma. We process it. We integrate it into our understanding of ourselves and the world. And eventually it stops defining every moment of our lives." I left the session feeling emotionally drained, but with a fragile sense of hope. There was a path forward, even if I couldn't yet see where it led. That evening, William called. I almost didn't answer, but something compelled me to pick up. "Thank you," he said immediately, "for taking my call." "What do you want, William?" My voice sounded tired even to my own ears. "I got the preliminary settlement proposal from your lawyer." He paused. "It's fair. More than fair, actually. This wasn't what I'd expected." "Okay. I just wanted to say that I accept the terms. All of them. The house, the investments, everything." Another pause. "I don't want to fight you on this, Kendra. I've hurt you enough." Suspicion flared. "Why the sudden cooperation? Your lawyer has been combative about everything so far." I fired him, William said. He was turning this into some kind of battle, and that's not what I want. What happened between us? It doesn't have to end with more pain. I thought of Dr. Larson's words about trauma, about integration. It already has, William. More. Pain is all that's left. "I know," he said softly. "And I'm sorry, truly sorry, for all of it. Not just for getting caught, like you said before, for betraying you, for Clarice, for everything." The apology should have meant something, should have offered some relief. But it was too little, too late, the words hollow against the magnitude of the betrayal. "I'll have Avery draw up the final papers," I said, "if you're serious about accepting the terms." "I am," he confirmed. I just want this to be over as painlessly as possible." After we hung up, I sat staring at the phone. William's capitulation should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt anticlimactic, as if all the anger I'd been carrying suddenly had nowhere to go. I called Avery to update her on the conversation. "It could be genuine remorse," she said, "or it could be that he's hiding assets and doesn't want us digging too deeply. We'll proceed cautiously, but this could significantly speed up the process." Speed was good. I was ready to close this chapter, to stop living in limbo. The divorce couldn't erase what had happened, but it would at least provide legal closure, a formal end to a relationship that had already died. As I prepared for bed that night, I realized I hadn't thought about Clarice all day. Not once. It was a small victory, but I held on to it as I drifted off to sleep. The formal dissolution of a marriage happens in stages: papers filed, negotiations conducted, assets divided. Each step clinical and detached, reducing years of intimacy to legal terminology and financial calculations. Yet the emotional untangling follows no such orderly process. 3 months after discovering William and Clarice together, I sat across from Avery in her office, signing the final divorce agreement. William had kept his word about not contesting the terms. The townhouse would be sold, proceeds split evenly. Our investment accounts divided based on contribution, personal items already separated, no alimony, no ongoing entanglements. "That's it," Avery said as I signed the last page. "Once the judge signs off, you'll officially be divorced." "How long will that take?" I asked, flexing my hand after all the signatures. Given the uncontested nature, a few weeks at most. She gathered the documents carefully. "You did well, Kendra. This is about as clean a break as divorces get." Clean. On paper, perhaps. The emotional reality was messier. My weekly sessions with Dr. Larson had helped me name the feelings: betrayal, grief, rage, even moments of relief that I now understood why things had felt off in my marriage for so long. But naming emotions didn't make them less potent. "Have you thought about what comes next?" Avery asked, closing the folder. I had, in fragments and pieces. The townhouse was already on the market. I'd been apartment hunting, something smaller but with character. Work remained a constant, but I'd started considering new opportunities. There, too, a creative director position had opened in the agency's West Coast office. "I'm keeping my options open," I replied. "Nothing's tying me here anymore." Avery nodded. "That's the silver lining of painful endings. They create space for new beginnings." Outside her office, the autumn air carried a crisp promise of change. Leaves spiraled from trees along the sidewalk, their vibrant colors a reminder that sometimes letting go was both beautiful and necessary. My phone buzzed with a text from Selma. "Mission accomplished?" "Papers signed?" I typed back. "Drinks tonight to celebrate?" Her response came immediately. "Hell yes. 7 p.m. at Marcel's. I'm buying." I smiled, pocketing my phone. The future remained uncertain, but I wasn't facing it alone. That evening at Marcel's, a stylish wine bar downtown, Selma raised her glass in a toast. "To freedom and new beginnings." "To freedom," I echoed, clinking my glass against hers. The wine was rich and complex, nothing like the cheap bottles William and I used to share when we were first married. "So," Selma said, setting down her glass, "now that it's officially almost over, how do you really feel?" I considered the question seriously. "Lighter," I said finally. "Like I've been carrying this weight for months and it's finally starting to lift." "Have you heard from either of them recently?" I shook my head. "William's been keeping his distance since he agreed to the settlement terms. And Clarice..." I trailed off, still finding it difficult to say her name without a twist of pain. "My mother says she's moved back home temporarily, taking some time. To find herself, apparently." Selma snorted. "She should try looking in other people's marriages. Seems that's where she likes to find herself." The remark was cutting, but it made me laugh, a genuine laugh that caught me by surprise. "That's terrible," I said, still smiling, but accurate. Selma refilled our glasses. "What about the West Coast job? Have you decided?" The creative director. Position represented more than just a career advancement. It was an escape, a chance to start fresh somewhere without memories lurking around every corner. "I'm considering it," I admitted. "I have a second interview next week. They seem serious about bringing me on." "LA would suit you," Selma mused. "All that sunshine and creative energy. Plus, 3,000 miles between you and the terrible twosome isn't a bad thing." "It would mean leaving everything familiar," I pointed out. "My friends, my routine." "Your trauma triggers?" Selma interrupted gently. "The grocery store where you might run into William? The cafe where you used to meet Clarice for lunch? The family gatherings you'll have to navigate?" She had a point. Even now, I found myself scanning restaurants and stores, tense with the possibility of unwanted encounters. The city I'd loved had become a minefield of memories and potential painful reunions. "I haven't decided yet," I said, "but I'm seriously considering it." As the evening progressed, our conversation drifted to lighter topics. Selma's new project at work, the disastrous date she'd been on the previous weekend, movies we wanted to see. For a few hours, I felt almost normal, like the person I'd been before everything fell apart. Walking to my car afterward, I paused to admire the city skyline, buildings illuminated against the night sky. Despite everything, I still loved this city. Could I really leave it behind? My apartment hunting had yielded a promising lead, a renovated loft in an old textile factory, all exposed brick and massive windows. It was nothing like the traditional townhouse William and I had shared. Nothing there would remind me of him. But would that be enough? Or would I still feel his absence, still wonder about running into Clarice at local spots, still brace myself every time my phone rang with my mother's number, anticipating uncomfortable family news? Dr. Larson had cautioned against making major decisions driven purely by the desire to escape pain. "Wherever you go, you take yourself with you," she'd said, "including your unresolved feelings." Still, the idea of reinvention pulled at me. Not just a new apartment, but a new city. New colleagues, new routines that had never included William or Clarice. When I arrived home, a package waited by my door. Small, wrapped in brown paper. No return address. I opened it cautiously in the kitchen, half expecting some gesture from William, another misguided attempt at reconciliation. Instead, I found a delicate silver bracelet nestled in tissue paper. I recognized it immediately, my grandmother's, which I'd admired as a child. A note accompanied it, my mother's handwriting immediately recognizable. "This was meant to be yours on your 35th birthday, but I thought you could use it now." Grandma always said it brought her strength in difficult times. She wore it through her own divorce and never regretted choosing herself. Love, Mom. Tears sprang unexpectedly to my eyes. My grandmother had rarely spoken of her first marriage, but she'd lived a vibrant, joy-filled life after it ended. Had built a career, found love again, raised children, traveled the world. Her life hadn't ended with divorce. In many ways, it had truly begun. I clasped the bracelet around my wrist, its weight both unfamiliar and comforting. Whatever I decided, staying or leaving, rebuilding here or starting fresh elsewhere, I would be choosing myself, my happiness, my future. My phone chimed with an email notification. The subject line from the real estate agent read, "Offer on townhouse." Someone wanted to buy the home William and I had shared, to make their own memories within those walls. It felt symbolic. Somehow, this tangible evidence that life moved forward, that spaces could be reclaimed, repurposed, reborn. Perhaps people could be too. I opened the email and began to read, the silver bracelet catching the light as I moved. Tomorrow, I would respond to the offer. Tomorrow, I would prepare for my interview with the LA office. Tomorrow, I would take another step forward. For tonight, it was enough to know that I could. The townhouse sold quickly to a young couple expecting their first child. As I walked through the empty rooms one final time, I tried to see the space through their eyes, full of potential, untainted by history. The hardwood floors they'd fill with toys, the kitchen where they'd prepare family meals, the backyard where a child would play. "Are you okay?" asked Selma, who had insisted on accompanying me for this last walkthrough. "I think I am," I replied, surprised to find it was true. The emptiness felt cleansing rather than hollow. We closed the front door, and I handed the keys to the real estate agent. Another chapter finished. 2 weeks later, I accepted the creative director position in Los Angeles. The decision came after my second interview, when the agency's founder, a dynamic woman in her 50s, had asked why I wanted the change. "Need a fresh perspective," I'd answered honestly. "Both professionally and personally." She'd nodded, understanding in her eyes. Sometimes reinvention is the most creative act of all. I gave my notice at work, began packing my apartment, and made arrangements for the cross-country move. Eva organized a farewell dinner with colleagues. Selma helped sort through my belongings, ruthlessly questioning whether each item deserved to make the journey to my new life. "This?" she'd ask, holding up a vase or book or kitchen gadget. "Does this bring you joy or just memories?" It became our sorting system, joy or memories. The former made the cut, the latter mostly didn't. The night before my departure, my parents drove up for a final dinner. We avoided mentioning Clarice, though I knew she remained at their home, working remotely and supposedly figuring things out. My mother had stopped trying to broker peace between us, finally accepting that some wounds wouldn't heal, at least, not in the foreseeable future. "We're proud of you," my father said as we said our goodbyes. "Taking this leap." "We'll visit soon," my mother promised, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Once you're settled." I hugged them both, feeling a complicated mix of love and sadness. They would always be caught in the middle, loving both their daughters despite everything that had happened. It wasn't fair to them, but it was our reality now. As I drove away from my old apartment the next morning, car packed with essentials for the cross-country journey, I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure on the sidewalk. William, standing beside his car watching me leave. Our eyes met briefly through the windshield. No smirk this time, just a solemn acknowledgement, perhaps even regret. I didn't stop, didn't roll down the window for final words or closure. Some chapters end without neat conclusions, trailing off into ellipses rather than decisive periods. The highway stretched before me, carrying me west toward a new beginning. In my rearview mirror, the city grew smaller, its skyline receding along with the pain it had come to represent. I touched my grandmother's bracelet, now a permanent fixture on my wrist, and pressed the accelerator. Whatever waited ahead, I was ready to meet it, stronger, wiser, and finally, mercifully, free. The California sun greeted me differently than the East Coast light I'd grown accustomed to. More direct, somehow. Unfiltered. My new apartment in Silver Lake had windows that captured this light, throwing it across hardwood floors in geometric patterns that shifted throughout the day. I'd been in Los Angeles for 6 weeks, enough time to establish the beginnings of a routine. The creative director role challenged me in ways my previous position hadn't, forcing me to stretch beyond comfortable patterns and familiar strategies. The agency culture was more relaxed but no less driven, a combination that suited my current state of mind. "You're settling in well," remarked Harry, the executive creative director who had championed my hiring. "The Westridge campaign concepts were exactly what we needed." "Thanks," I replied, still getting used to the casual praise that seemed part of the West Coast communication style. The team made it easy. My team, I was still adjusting to that concept. 5 talented creatives who looked to me for direction and approval. Leading them required a confidence I was still rebuilding, but each successful project helped solidify my footing. The personal adjustment proved more complex than the professional one. Los Angeles was a city of strangers, which felt both liberating and isolating. No risk of uncomfortable encounters with William or Clarice, but also no familiar faces, no shared history with anyone around me. I'd made a few acquaintances, other transplants in my building, colleagues from work who'd invited me to happy hours and beach gatherings. But friendship took time, especially the deep kind I'd left behind with Selma and Eva. Dr. Larson and I continued our sessions via video calls. Loneliness is part of any major transition, she assured me during our last conversation. Give yourself permission to feel it without judging it as failure. On a Sunday morning 6 weeks after my arrival, I decided to explore my new neighborhood properly. The local farmers market buzzed with activity, vendors arranging vibrant produce, locals filling tote bags with fresh bread and flowers, musicians setting up on corners. I wandered through the stalls, selecting oranges and avocados, listening to fragments of conversations around me. This could become part of my routine, I thought, a small ritual to anchor my weeks. At a coffee stand, I waited behind a woman about my age with curly hair and an enormous dog sitting patiently at her feet. Beautiful dog, I commented when the massive animal turned to look at me with soulful eyes. The woman smiled. This is Brutus. He looks intimidating, but he's basically a teddy bear. As if to prove her point, Brutus leaned gently against my leg, looking up hopefully. He's convinced everyone he meets exists solely to pet him, she explained with a laugh. I'm Avery, by the way. Kendra, I replied, kneeling to scratch behind the dog's ears. I just moved to the neighborhood. Recently? From where? Virginia, about 6 weeks ago. Avery nodded. Brave. I've lived here my whole life, so I can't imagine starting over somewhere completely new. It wasn't exactly planned, I admitted, surprising myself with the candor. But sometimes life forces your hand. Something in my tone must have conveyed more than my words, because Avery gave me a considering look. Well, Brutus and I are market regulars. If you ever want company while exploring the neighborhood, we're usually here Sunday mornings. It was a casual offer, the kind strangers make without expectation. But it felt like a tiny bridge extending across the moat of isolation I'd built around myself. I'd like that, I said, meaning it. As I continued through the market with my purchases, I realized I was smiling, not the forced expression I'd perfected for work and social obligations, but something genuine. A small crack in the armor I'd been wearing since that afternoon, I'd found William and Clarice together. Perhaps this was how healing happened. Not in dramatic gestures or definitive moments, but in small openings. Tiny permissions to move forward, to risk connection again, to believe in possibilities rather than guard against them. Seasons in Los Angeles blended together in subtle shifts of light, rather than the dramatic transformations I'd known back east. No brilliant fall foliage, no snow-covered streets, just gentle variations in temperature and the changing angle of the sun. 6 months passed this way, in gradual transitions rather than abrupt changes. My professional life flourished in ways I hadn't anticipated. The creative freedom at the agency allowed me to develop campaigns that won industry recognition and brought in new clients. My team had gelled into a cohesive unit, respecting my leadership while contributing their unique perspectives. The New York office is jealous, Harry told me after a particularly successful pitch. They're wondering how we stole you away. I smiled at the irony. If not for William and Clarice's betrayal, I might never have considered leaving. Sometimes destruction cleared the path for creation. My personal life had developed more slowly but steadily. Sunday mornings with Avery and Brutus at the farmers market had expanded to occasional hikes in the canyons and dinner at local restaurants. Through her, I'd met a small circle of friends, creative professionals with busy lives who gathered for wine and conversation when schedules aligned. They knew the basics of my story, that I was divorced, that the breakup had been painful, that I'd moved across the country for a fresh start. But I'd shared none of the specific details, the sister-shaped wound that still ached when prodded. Communication with my parents remained steady. Weekly video calls, text messages, photos shared of my new life. They'd visited once, marveling at the differences between my sleek Silver Lake apartment and the traditional townhouse I'd shared with William. They never mentioned Clarice directly during these calls, though I gathered from oblique references that she'd moved to Boston for a new job. The divorce had been finalized months ago, the legal ties severed cleanly. William had reached out once. Afterward, an email that sat in my inbox for days before I found the courage to open it. "I hope you're finding what you're looking for in California," he'd written. "I think about you often and wish things had ended differently between us. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." I never replied. Some doors were better left closed. Dr. Larson and I had reduced our sessions to monthly check-ins. "You've done remarkable work processing this trauma," she told me during our last conversation. "How do you feel about your progress?" I considered the question seriously. "Less defined by it," I said finally. "The betrayal used to be the first thing I thought about every morning. Now days go by when it doesn't cross my mind at all." "That's significant progress," she affirmed. "And your trust issues? Have those improved?" This was harder to answer. I'd made friends in Los Angeles, yes, but with careful boundaries. I dated occasionally, brief connections that never progressed beyond a few pleasant evenings. Part of me remained wary, vigilant against potential pain. "I'm still cautious," I admitted, "but I'm not paralyzed by it anymore." On the anniversary of the day I'd discovered William and Clarice together, I took myself to the beach. The Pacific stretched endlessly before me, waves rhythmically erasing patterns in the sand only to create new ones. Nature's lesson in resilience and renewal. I'd carried my grandmother's bracelet in my pocket rather than wearing it, unsure if I wanted the tangible reminder on this particular day. Now I took it out, feeling its familiar weight in my palm. A year ago, I'd thought my life was destroyed. The marriage I'd invested in, the sister I'd trusted, the future I'd planned, all shattered in a single afternoon. I couldn't have imagined. Then that destruction would make space for reconstruction. That pain could push me toward growth. I slipped the bracelet back onto my wrist, watching the silver catch the late afternoon light. Some scars would always remain, but they no longer defined me. They were simply part of a larger, more complex pattern, like the waves constantly reshaping the shoreline, changing what was while creating what could be. My mother's call came on. A Tuesday morning as I was reviewing concepts for a new campaign. Her voice sounded strained, hesitant in a way that immediately put me on alert. "Is everything all right?" I asked, moving away from my desk to the privacy of a small conference room. "Your father and I are fine," she assured me quickly. It's about Clarice." My body tensed automatically at the name, a reflexive response that had diminished over time, but never fully disappeared. "What about her?" My tone was carefully neutral. "She's engaged." My mother paused, clearly gauging my reaction. "The wedding is planned for next spring. She wanted me to tell you before you heard it from someone else." I sat with the information, searching for the emotions it might trigger. Anger, resentment, curiosity about who would marry someone capable of such betrayal? But what I found instead was a muted indifference, like hearing news about a distant acquaintance, rather than someone who had once been central to my life. "I see," I said finally. "Thanks for letting me know." "Kendra, I know this puts us in a difficult position." The strain in her voice intensified. "The wedding. You're her sister. She wants you there." A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Not bitter, just genuinely surprised by the audacity. "That's not going to happen, Mom." "I understand," she said quickly. I told her it was too much to ask. But she's been doing a lot of work on herself this past year. Therapy, making amends where she can. She knows what she did was unforgivable, but she's trying to be better. I didn't respond immediately, processing this information. The idea of Clarice in therapy, confronting her actions, was something I hadn't considered. I'd frozen her in my mind as she was that day, selfish, disloyal, destroying my life without remorse. "I'm glad she's getting help," I said finally, meaning it. "But that doesn't change what happened between us." "Of course not," my mother agreed. I thought you should know she's trying, and that she asks about you. How you're doing in California, if you're happy." After the call ended, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Los Angeles skyline. The city spread before me, a landscape that had become familiar over the past year. My new home, my new life. A life that had been forced upon me by betrayal, but that I had shaped into something meaningful. Was I happy? The question lingered as I returned to my desk. Not the uncomplicated happiness I'd once taken for granted, perhaps, but something more nuanced. I had built a career I was proud of, formed friendships that sustained me, created a life that reflected my values and ambitions. If happiness was measured by peace and purpose rather than the absence of pain, then yes, I was happy. That evening, Avery and I met for dinner at a new restaurant in the Arts District. Over plates of shared appetizers, I told her about my mother's call. "Your sister's got nerve," she said, shaking her head. "Expecting you at her wedding after what she did." "I think it's more complicated than that," I found myself saying. "She's trying to fix something that can't be fixed, but at least she's trying." Avery studied me curiously. "You sound almost forgiving." "Not forgiving," I corrected. "Understanding, maybe. There's a difference." Later, walking back to my car, I realized the distinction was important. Forgiveness implied wiping the slate clean, returning to what was. Understanding meant acknowledging the reality of what had happened, the pain it had caused, while choosing not to be consumed by it any longer. I would never again have the relationship with Clarice that I'd once taken for granted. That bond was irreparably broken. But perhaps I could reach a place where her name didn't immediately trigger pain, where I could wish her well from a distance without it costing me anything. It wasn't forgiveness. It was freedom, from anger that served no purpose, from pain that only hurt me now, from a past that no longer defined my future. Under the palm trees and city lights, I found myself smiling at the realization. One more step forward, one more piece of myself reclaimed from the wreckage of betrayal. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.